The Galactic Military Academy's training yard buzzed with the usual mix of anticipation and derision as Cadet Marcus Chen approached the obstacle course. Around him, beings from across the known galaxy watched with varying degrees of interest and amusement. The towering Carathians flexed their chitinous exoskeletons, while the crystalline Vexhi hummed with electromagnetic energy. Even the amphibious Glextar, usually focused on their own aquatic training modules, had paused to observe. "Look at that," rumbled Cadet Zixcar, his massive frame casting a shadow over the human. "The pink skin thinks it can complete the endurance trial." Marcus had grown accustomed to such comments during his 3 months at the academy. Standing at merely 6 feet tall and weighing less than 200 pounds, he was dwarfed by almost every other species present. The Carathians averaged 8 feet and possessed natural armor plating. The Technari boasted dense muscle fibers that could generate forces equivalent to industrial hydraulics. Even the diminutive Keyleth, barely 4 feet tall, had reinforced skeletal structures that could withstand pressures that would crush most beings. Humans, as the galactic community had concluded, were fragile. "The Deathworlder thinks size doesn't matter," chittered a Vexhi cadet, its prismatic body refracting the training facility's lights into dancing rainbows. How quaint. Marcus ignored the commentary, focusing instead on the course ahead. The endurance trial was designed to test the physical limits of cadets from different worlds, with adjustments made for species-specific capabilities. The final obstacle, a disabled training mech weighing approximately 12 tons, had to be moved 50 meters to complete the course. Most species accomplish this through brute force, advanced technology, or evolved biological advantages. The human approach, Marcus had learned, was considered a curiosity at best. He began the course at a steady pace, his movements fluid and economical. Where the Carathians smashed through barriers with their natural armor, Marcus vaulted over them. Where the Technari punched through reinforced walls, he found gaps and squeezed through with surprising flexibility. The watching crowd's amusement began to shift to puzzlement as he maintained his pace without the dramatic displays of power they expected. "He's not even trying," observed Instructor Veltum, a veteran Glextar whose career spanned 4 decades of training alien warriors. Most species exhaust themselves showing off in the early stages. Humans are known for their efficiency, replied Chief Instructor Mordak, though his tone suggested he found the concept dubious. "Though I fail to see how efficiency will help him move 12 tons of metal." Marcus reached the halfway point while other cadets were still struggling with the third obstacle. His breathing remained controlled, his movements precise. He had studied the course extensively, noting not just the obvious paths but the subtle alternatives that most beings overlooked. Where others saw barriers, he saw handholds. Where they saw challenges, he saw physics problems with elegant solutions. The mockery intensified as he approached the final obstacle. "Someone should stop him before he embarrasses himself," rumbled a Carathian. "Humans don't have the genetic modifications for heavy lifting. They're barely evolved past their homeworld's basic requirements." "I heard their planet is actually classified as a death world," whispered a Keyleth cadet. "But they're so fragile. It makes no sense." Marcus stood before the training mech, its massive bulk gleaming under the artificial lights. 12 tons of advanced alloys and combat systems, designed to simulate the weight and bulk of actual military hardware. Around the training yard, cadets had gathered to witness what they assumed would be the human's inevitable failure. He walked slowly around the mech, his eyes taking in every detail. The watching crowd interpreted this as hesitation, but Marcus was calculating. Weight distribution, center of gravity, structural stress points. His instructors had always told him that humans couldn't match other species for raw strength, but they possessed something else, the ability to think their way through problems that others solved with brute force. 30 seconds remaining, announced Instructor Veltum. Marcus positioned himself at what appeared to be the worst possible angle, beneath the mech's heaviest section. The crowd's chatter died to a murmur of anticipation. Even the instructors leaned forward, curious to see how spectacularly the human would fail. Then Marcus began to lift. But he wasn't lifting the entire mech. His hands found purchase points that others had missed, structural joints where the machine's weight was distributed through its frame rather than concentrated in solid mass. His legs, which looked spindly compared to a Technari's hydraulic pistons, were positioned to take advantage of leverage and mechanical advantage. The mech began to rise. A collective gasp echoed through the training yard as one corner of the 12-ton machine left the ground. Marcus's face showed strain, but his breathing remained controlled. He wasn't fighting the weight. He was redirecting it, using the machine's own structure against itself. Impossible, breathed a Carathian. Cadet. Marcus adjusted his grip and stance. The mech tilted further, its weight shifting to 3 contact points instead of 4. With a controlled motion that spoke of perfect timing and spatial awareness, he began to walk the machine forward, lifting and pivoting in a complex dance of physics and determination. "He's not carrying it," observed Chief Instructor Mordak, his voice filled with professional appreciation. "He's manipulating its structural dynamics, using gravity and momentum as tools rather than obstacles." The human continued his methodical progress across the training ground. Each step was calculated, each adjustment precise. Where other species had relied on overwhelming the obstacle with superior strength, Marcus was having a conversation with it in the language of applied physics. 50 meters. The mech settled onto its designated mark with a resonant clang that echoed through the suddenly silent training yard. Marcus straightened, his breathing only slightly elevated, and turned to face the crowd of stunned cadets and instructors. The mockery had evaporated, replaced by something approaching awe. "How?" asked Cadet Zixkar, his earlier derision completely absent. Marcus wiped his hands on his uniform and shrugged, a gesture that somehow conveyed both humility and quiet confidence. "You assumed the challenge was about strength," he said simply. "Sometimes the challenge is about understanding." Instructor Veltum's amphibious features creased in what might have been a smile. "And this is why humans terrify half the galaxy," she said quietly to her colleague. "They don't just solve problems, they redefine them." As the crowd dispersed, conversations buzzed with new respect for the fragile human cadet. They had witnessed something that would become legend in Academy folklore. The day a human had accomplished through intelligence and determination what others achieved through genetic superiority. Marcus Chen continued his training, no longer mocked but watched with the careful attention reserved for beings who might surprise you when you least expected it. In a galaxy filled with stronger, faster, more naturally gifted species, humanity had found its niche not through evolution, but through innovation. And that perhaps was the most terrifying advantage of all.